Oh, these two questions. We're going to have some fun here. So we'll get to the most juicy one first, and we'll get to the, I guess, more tame one later. But they were great questions that came in from Jason and Adrian. So first one comes in from Jason, and he says this: I'd love to hear some stories about what you have been able to be part of from your dream job. Share some highlights, meeting coaches or NFL players, celebrities, etc., or just moments that have been special to you from the radio show to broadcasting Locked On Cougars. I'm going to pivot on this, Jason, and tell a story that I have held on to for months now, because the proverbial statute of limitations has expired on this, I think. And if they want to come back at me, go for it, because they're lucky I didn't blast them at the time. So let's set the scene. Remember when BYU lost to Arizona State last season? Obviously a tough loss. And there's a quarterback by the name of Sam Leavitt. Brother Dallin played at BYU for a time, transferred to Utah State, has had a pretty fraught relationship with Brigham Young University over the years and the fan base. So in the aftermath of that game, many of you might recall that Dallin got on Instagram and told BYU fans to do something very crude to themselves. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If you saw it, if you did not, you can just Google it. It'll pop up. You can stop right now, Google it. I'm not going to play it on the podcast because it's very lewd and there's children listening to this podcast. Bigger point to be made is I took the video of that because it had been edited by a lot of people who posted it with just the part telling BYU fans, like I said, to go do certain things. He started out saying, hey, I respect BYU, respect Kalani Sitake, but BYU fans, and everyone goes into it. I posted that on social media, on Twitter in particular. And as the weekend progressed, it picked up some steam. Obviously, when you go after a fan base the way that he did, speaking of Dallin, obviously people are going to react to it. It's one of my most retweeted, most noticed overall tweets of all time. I even have one that from John Boy, if you know who John Boy is, that rivals it. It's pretty, and I know the Twitter is one thing, but regardless, the point is Sunday evening after that game, so 24 hours-ish after the game ended, I got a message from an agent saying, hey, Jake, I'm so-and-so. I represent some players from various universities, including some at BYU. So this agent, I'm not going to name him. I'm not going to put him on blast, or maybe I should, but said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about a couple of things tomorrow. So the premise I was inferring is that he had something on BYU, maybe some background intel that I could utilize. In media, you take advantage to talk to people and see what they have for you. So I said, sure, I'll give you a call after my radio show Monday morning. So it's around 11 a.m. Mountain time when I gave him a phone call, and he said, he gets on the call and says, Jake, thanks so much for taking the time. And he says, so, and I probably should have mentioned this right up front, but I'm Sam Leavitt's NIL agent. And I'm like, okay, so what's the deal? So he goes into this spiel about the video that Dallin Leavitt had put out and why he was so upset about it. It had caused family issues within the Leavitt family. And he essentially, the whole ploy was to get me to take my version of the video down because in their mind, it would end the overall fur around what he said to BYU fans. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll consider it, but I'm kind of disinclined because your guy, and this, by the way, this is not Dallin Leavitt's agent. It's his brother's agent. Beside the point. Says, hey, will you consider taking it out? I'll consider it, but I'm kind of disinclined to say I'm going to do it because it's news. He put it on a public forum. That's his problem. We said, well, I'd like to have you talk to Dallin Leavitt himself. Great. So we get on a three-way call at this point, and Dallin Leavitt goes into the same spiel that he's trying to make up with his brother. And I've had such a fraud. And there are so many details in this that I've forgotten and probably should mention here. But at the end of the call, I said, okay, guys, I will consider it, but understand that you made a mistake, Dallin, and it is what it is. And me taking my individual post down is not going to stop at that point, probably hundreds of others that were out there on the internet, regardless. So I got that call, talked to certain people that I trust on such matters and say, hey, should I take it down? Am I in any legal ramification with this? There was no grounds for them to really do anything legally. So I'm leaving it up. So, but the reason I tell this story is because the Leavitt family thought that little old me doing a podcast and being a radio producer in Salt Lake City was going to stop or strained relationships within the Leavitt family. And I will also add this. Remember, if Arizona State had lost the following week or other things played out, BYU could have made it to Arlington to play in the Big 12 title game. That was still there on the table for BYU going into that Houston game, if you will recall. This agent had the gall to tell me this also on that phone call. Jake, I understand why you have the stance you have, but understand that we're trying to make sure that Sam's got a clear head and everything's going. But hey, it may play out better in BYU's favor if you leave it up. What? Dude, come on now. I'm a podcaster and a radio producer. Get over yourself. And by the way, I think looking at it, it worked out just fine for Arizona State and Sam Leavitt. I'm just saying. I still see Dallin Leavitt posting about his brother. I still see him hanging around. Don't have your agent call me and give me some sob story that, quite frankly, I think is a bunch of you-know-what, bull honky. But that happened this season. That's pulling back the curtain a little bit on trust me, I've got many of those from now nearly 15 years of working in the media, and I hope to have many more over the years. That's just one little one. And I meant to also, because Adrian asked the question about my background in radio. He said, I can't be the only one that wants to hear how you got your start in radio. You've done well, and I think it'd be cool to hear. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version because you got to get to some other stuff here on BYU basketball. But my start in radio came because of my dad, quite frankly. And back in the early days of what is now X, formerly Twitter, Greg Wrubell, this was 2010, so the summer of 2010, put out a post at that point, a tweet saying, hey, I'm looking for an intern for this upcoming football season. If you're interested, apply. You have to be a student. It's for school credit. It's an unpaid internship. And I was working at a job while I was still a student at BYU at the time. I said, that'd be kind of cool to do, but I studied history in college, guys. I'm not a comms guy. I know that I work in communications now, but it's not my background. It wasn't what I was studying in college at the time. And my dad, I told him about it. I said, apply. Just do it. What's the worst they can say? No. Then you move on. So I applied for it. Sounded like Greg Wrubell actually down in the Smithfield house. He set up in those where the Rock now resides. We were sitting up there talking, and I kind of gave my background. I was a BYU guy, growing up BYU fan. I'm going to BYU. I'd love to work around the program. It's a dream of mine. And he said, great, I appreciate you taking the time after our chat, and I'll get back in touch with you. 3 days later, Greg calls me up and says, hey, the gig's yours. Sweet. So I worked with Greg for an entire year. Remember, 2010, 2011, I did the football season, and then the basketball season was the year of the Jimmer. And talk about a year to be an intern and to be kind of thrown into the fire, or the frying pan with regards to media. It was crazy, crazy times. I learned so much that first year, and I loved every second of it, and said, you know what? This is what I want to do. I want to be in the media. It didn't take very long to realize this is what I want to do. Well, I didn't have a ton of prospects immediately coming out of that. So then I spent another year, the following year, and the NBA lockout that year, if you recall, that the NBA didn't tip off till mid-December when they finally got going. Worked with David Locke was then a 1320K fan as a broadcast assistant. He still does this program to this day. Interned on that. And then the summer after that, Scott Garrard, who was the program director for 1280 The Zone now, which is now 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone, which I still work for to this day, reached out to both Greg and David and said, hey, I've got this little signal called 960 AM. Any of you might recall, it's what Ben Criddle's show is on. I'd like to start a BYU show. Do you have a producer they have in mind? And they said, yeah, Jake Hatch. So that's how I got hired in radio for the first time ever. I was the original producer of Cougar Sports, which was then Cougar Sports with Lemma Harrington and Ben Criddle. Lemma and I, after a couple of years, actually, I think I left first. I got promoted to working with DJ and PK, where I've been for the better part of actually more than a decade now. And the rest is history, quite frankly. So that's the kind of the Cliff Notes version of how I got into the media. And I've been lucky. It truly is a dream gig. Like I said, I realized it maybe not even a month into working with Craig. I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And it's worked. Trust me. I'm not just sitting back and watching games, and that's the perk of it. But many of you, I think, understand that the hours involved. That I put it on the show with DJ and PK every morning. I'm up at 3:30 a.m. Daily. Come home. I've got 3 kids now. I'm married. I do this podcast. I record it in the evenings. there's a time consuming element to it, but it is absolutely a dream gig. And when you get agents reaching out to you and asking you to take down posts and trying to play some sob story and then getting down Leavitt on the phone, just welcome to my everyday life in radio. I never quite know what my media life is ever going to hold on a day-to-day basis, but there are both really high and really weird and really low moments. And it's all rolled up into, I've quite frankly, overall, I've loved every second of it. I truly, it's been a dream job. I'm lucky enough that I get to talk about sports and it provides for my family. Like, there are not a ton of people in the world that get to do it. My passion, which is sports, it's my career. So it's a really cool thing. So yeah. So maybe those two stories matter to you. Maybe they don't. But when that question was asked, it's Friday. We're going to have some fun. And yeah, I hope that agent hears about this and calls me back up because I got a few other thoughts for we'll hold off on that for another day.